May the Lord protect and defend you. May He always shield you from shame. May you come to be in Yisrael a shining name. May you be like Ruth and like Esther. May you be deserving of praise. Favor them, O Lord, with happiness and peace. Oh, hear our Sabbath prayer. Amen.
In case there's somebody that doesn't recognize that, that's from Fiddler on the Roof, in the scene where Tevye and Golda are at the Shabbos table and they're with their 5 daughters, no sons, and they give them this beautiful blessing. For the last 500 years, Jewish parents have been blessing their daughters on Friday nights with the trifold priestly blessing preceded by the words, Yisimech Elohim Kesara, Rivka, Rachel, Valeah. May you be blessed like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. It's a custom that fostered a sense of importance for Jewish girls who, though they could not learn in yeshiva like their brothers, were treated as equals at the Shabbos table. I've been thinking a lot about women lately, and Jewish women in particular, partly because this is such an interesting time to be a woman in America. This morning, I hope to uplift select Jewish women living in pre-Israel Palestine, Europe, and in America, who left an indelible mark on society because they figured out how to take agency that was not naturally accorded to women of their generation, and they all did so for a higher purpose. I believe that their Jewishness was integral to their developed intellects, courage, and vision. It all starts with Sarah, wife of Abraham, and history's first Jewish mother. And Rosh Hashanah is focused on Sarah, and there's a reason for that. Almost like the Torah itself, the complex person that we call Sarah could be every Jewish woman's mirror in some facet. Based upon simply what we read about her in Torah, not even the Midrash, she could be described as a devoted wife and aunt, a woman grappling with the pain of infertility, the wife of a successful businessman, a generous hostess, a person who survived dangerous situations in the clutches of powerful men who subjugated her, a boss, a communicator with God, a birth giver, someone who had to make hard decisions that had long-term consequences, a parent who experienced the loss of a child, a woman whose spouse broke trust with her, an elder and a martyr. From the morsels of scripture written about Sarah, she is all that. There are countless lenses through which close readers of Torah throughout history have tried to understand, elevate, and sympathize with the mother of the Israelite nation. In some circles, she is considered the epitome of beauty and royalty. Others focus on the series of painful events she experienced throughout her life. Some vilify her for her treatment of Hagar. Like all of us, Sarah is complicated. Judaism embraces the fact that leaders like King David or Sarah have many layers to their personal profiles, which is what draws us to them and how we can appreciate their greatness. The Jewish world has always been a patriarchy, and the Jewish women that appear throughout biblical, rabbinic, and recorded history who have made an impact on the world are clever, strong-willed women of conviction who figured out how to work within and around societal barriers to defend and perpetuate their people. Some, like Rebecca and Tamar, figured out how to use their wiles to manipulate and deceive to achieve a desired outcome. Others, like Miriam and Ruth, poised themselves to be graced by the goodness of people in power to further their cause. Groundbreaking Jewish women leaders in the 19th and 20th centuries stand on the shoulders of biblical heroines and historical figures like Rebbe Meir's wife Bruria, who was one of the few women recognized for her Talmudic prowess in the 1st and 2nd centuries, or Gluckel from Hamelin, the 17th century German-born businesswoman and mother of 13. She was taught how to read and write by her father. Her memoirs, which were found, are one of history's most comprehensive windows into Jewish life in Ashkenaz in the late Middle Ages. Both women were well-read and educated. No doubt that in the last 2,000 years, hundreds of thousands of noteworthy Jewish women living in every corner of the world exemplified courage and intelligence in the face of tragedy and danger. Their achievements were never recorded for posterity, but because we are still here in 2004, they are strong links in the chain of Jewish continuity. In Abigail Pogrebin's 2005 book, Stars of David, Prominent Jews Talk About Being Jewish, I just happen to have it on my bedside, and so I brought it to show you. Of the 62 interviews she conducted in the early 2000s, only 18 were with women, but of those featured, 7 either broke glass ceilings in their respective fields or were protégés of pioneering women in the generation before them. I'm going to give you 3 examples. In the 1950s, Joan Rivers broke into the fraternity of male stand-up comedy and paved the way for all women in that industry. By her own testimony, it was grueling, and she was never included in the boys' club, which was like George Carlin and people of that generation. But her tenacity and belief in herself led to a stunning career that changed American comedy forever and made her one of the most financially successful comedic personalities ever. Ruth Bader Ginsburg graduated as one of 2 people in the top of her class in Columbia Law School, but she was the only one with a toddler at home. Because of her difficulty in finding work after graduation, even with her credentials, and getting approved for tenure, and consistently receiving less pay than her male counterparts, she was America's first attorney to dedicate her career to naming and addressing gender discrimination, co-founding the Women's Rights Law Reporter, and co-authoring the first law school casebook on sex discrimination, among her lifelong roster of career accomplishments. Second-wave feminist leader and journalist Gloria Steinem, who turned 90 this year, co-founded Ms. Magazine, the National Women's Political Caucus, and Women's Action Alliance, among many other programs that have benefited the women of my generation and every generation since in ways that we cannot even begin to understand or appreciate. Just as impressive is her paternal grandmother, Pauline Perlmutter Steinem, a Jewish suffragist born in Poland. Pauline was elected to the Board of Education in Toledo, Ohio in 1904, and she is one of the earliest women to hold any elected public office in the United States, and most certainly the first Jewish woman. Pauline's resume of political engagement is stunning. Before Joan, Ruth, and Gloria were even twinkles in their parents' eyes, in 1911, Hannah Meisel, a Russian-born immigrant to Palestine, was the driving force behind creating the Kinneret Farm, the first woman's training farm for agricultural workers. Hannah immigrated with an agricultural degree in her hand. Why? In response to the frustration experienced by earlier women pioneers who were being relegated to childcare and kitchen work, even though the Zionist enterprise was supposed to model equal opportunity, and these women wanted to work in the fields. Kinneret Farm also became the initial focal point for women's political organizing in Palestine. And so in 1921, Ada Fishman Maimon, who is a proud descendant of the Rambam, founded Moetzet HaPoalot, the General Council of Women Workers in Palestine. She did that because only 4 of the 87 people elected to the first Histadrut Council were women. Moetzet Hapoelot championed women's pursuit of suffrage and equality, trained women in urban, industrial, and rural agricultural work, and managed corps of volunteers and welfare organizations. Ada was born in Romania to religious Zionist parents and is recognized as one of the spiritual mothers of Jewish feminism in Israel. She traveled to kibbutzim, farms, and cities to teach women how to organize for themselves, for better pay, and like Benot Zelophehad in the Book of Numbers, she taught them how to assert their right to own property and sponsor family members to make aliyah. She was never able to accept the fact that ultra-Orthodox men would leave the room when she entered a meeting. Now, around the same time that these three major European waves of Aliyah to Palestine were charting a course for a modern Jewish homeland in the Middle East, on the other side of the world, the American labor movement was taking shape. Since the early 1900s, and this is well known, cohorts of Jewish American immigrant women, driven by their sense of justice, played a central role in determining the AFL agenda, bringing their sensibilities about the organizing process and the courage to speak up about labor's need to support government regulations to protect women in the workplace. Not surprisingly, they encountered consistent pushback from male union members who rallied against women's participation in the labor movement, but they were never fazed. The reach of their bravery and impact on the American worker of every gender and cultural background for the last 125 years cannot be overstated. It wasn't just secular pioneers to America and Israel who innovated change for women in their communities. Sarah Schneerer, a Polish dressmaker with an 8th grade education, founded the Beis Yaakov movement. It was her idea, dedicated to educating religious girls in Torah and culture. She started off in Poland, and her idea spread like wildfire across Europe and then to the UK and North America. It started in 1917 with a little schoolroom of girls in her seamstress studio in Krakow. But by 1935, the Beis Yaakov educational movement was serving over 30,000 young girls. And although her original intent was to give these girls a rich Jewish education that would enhance their secular studies, she inspired a decades-long stream of religious women, scholars, writers, nurses, and artists who came through the Beis Yaakov movement. Now, here's a surprise. The Jewish female historical figure who touched the greatest number of people during and after her lifetime was Blanche Rachel Mira Alfaza, known for most of her adult life to millions of followers simply as the mother, but not the kind who makes matzo ball soup. Mira was born in 1878 in Paris to Maurice Alfaza, a Turkish Jewish father, and Matilda Ismailun, an Egyptian Jewish mother. They were a very wealthy, educated, and assimilated Jewish family. Mira learned to read at the age of 7 and by 14 had read almost every book in her father's library, which helped her master several languages. By age 20, she was an accomplished artist, a fine artist, and a self-declared atheist. She never understood the significance of her various esoteric and supernatural experiences as a child until she encountered the world of yoga and meditation as an adult. Her extraordinary spiritual gifts help her earn the title Mother and ascended to famed leadership as a legendary spiritual guru. She founded a well-known ashram in India and established a universal town that still exists, where men and women from all countries are able to live in peace and harmony above all creed, politics, and nationality. Mira remained a charismatic leader until her death at the age of 95. Her rejection of Judaism as a religion, as an aside, there has never been a woman before or after whose religious leadership was recognized as widely or with such reverence. And I posit, this is Marcia, that it was precisely because of her sophisticated, enlightened Jewish upbringing, not to mention her family wealth, that provided her with the many essential tools needed to achieve and maintain her vast influence and stature in India. Speaking of religious leadership, about the time that Hebrew Union College ordained its first female rabbi in 1972, a 20-something Debbie Friedman, who had been raised in a conservative synagogue not yet open to women's participation, brought her passion for prayer and music to the Reform camping movement. In the Haftarah we read yesterday, we encountered Samuel's mother, Hannah, who was pleading with God in silence to help her become pregnant. She was moving her lips, but not speaking. Eli, the priest in charge, first accused her of being drunk, but later realized that her sincerity and passion were a manifestation of extreme piety. When Debbie started sharing her Torah through music, she was not intending to disrespect the cantorial tradition or revolutionize Jewish sacred or liturgical music, though that was how her work was perceived for much of her lifetime. Like Hannah, Debbie was compelled to pour her heart out to God, and her medium was song and guitar. For nearly 40 years, she composed songs and prayers that bridged the centuries-old idiom of Jewish prayer with a post-World War II American Judaism. Sadly, for much of her career, the established cantorate, which had long since passed its prime, was disrespectful to and threatened by the scope of her influence. I was in cantorial school during that era. Some teachers would make derogatory statements about her music, and once when she was invited to speak to the students in my program in the late 90s, several students actually boycotted her visit. Very often, prophets are not fully appreciated until after their death. Debbie's ability to relate to liturgical text and imbue them with a spirit and musical structure that lifted up prayer for all 20th century Americans, first within the Reform movement, but ultimately within every Jewish circle, was unparalleled. Countless Jewish musicians who began creating a new American sound in the 70s, 80s, and 90s state with conviction that they owed Debbie a debt of gratitude for pioneering an art form within Jewish music that set in motion a new vernacular of prayer. After her passing, Hebrew Union College dedicated its School of Sacred Music to her memory. And I always feel a light in my heart whenever I attend Havdalah at the modern Orthodox synagogue in Irvine, Beth Jacob, and I hear the rabbi use her iconic melody. And I know that Debbie smiles every time her music finds its way into unexpected settings. I will venture to guess that never before have Joan Rivers, Hannah Meisel, Mira Alfaza, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Debbie Friedman been referenced in the same talk. What unites them is their powerful, sophisticated Jewish ancestry and history, including all the pain and hardship that comes with it. Some of the women spoken about this morning were raised as cultural Jews. Others were raised in religious households. Some were affluent, others very working class, if not poor. We have no idea if their parents were nurturing, supportive, harsh, or indulgent, but what we do know is this: that each of their Jewish families made sure that their daughters were educated and given a sense of self-worth that translated into some measure of confidence to speak truth to power, to outsmart a heavily gamed system, and to move forward into the unknown with a sense of purpose on behalf of themselves, the voiceless, and the underserved in concert with their convictions. A deep sociological exploration into why it is that women have been essential to Jewish survival and success in every age and stage of our history is a topic for another sermon. But in deference to Sarah Imenu, Hagar, and Hannah, I simply suggest that how our tradition has historically connected with and seeks to understand its female biblical persona, buttressed by centuries of blessing our daughters and reciting the end of Proverbs 31, Eshet Chayil, at the Shabbos table, is the foundation of our strength. These practices are embedded into Jewish DNA, and have impacted even the most secular of families. And without meaning to sound like an apologist, Jewish practice has always been on the forefront of progress for women. And we today, all of us in this room, stand on the shoulders of the courageous figures past and present who were not afraid to say what needed to be said and then do something about it. I'm thinking also just about the people that shared their life stories here this weekend, Sandy and Stephanie and Sarah. And the deep faith and commitment that they have to preserving our people. Prioritizing the act of blessing our daughters and honoring our spouses on Friday nights is an age-old practice with exponential returns. And so I want to offer this to all of you, men and women alike. What a precious find is a capable woman. She rises while it is still night and supplies provisions for her household, the daily fare of her maids. She sets her mind on an estate and acquires it. She plants a vineyard by her own labors. She girds herself with strength and performs her tasks with vigor. She sees that her business thrives. Her lamp never goes out at night. She gives generously to the poor. Her hands are stretched to the needy. Grace is deceptive. Beauty is illusory. It is for her fear of the Lord that a woman is to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand, and let her works praise her at the gates. Sheker hachen vehevel hayofi, Isha yirat Adonai, Hititalal tenula mipri yadeh v'hallelujah basharim maseha. Shana Tova.